Let's see. We've got Linda in Northern California next. Linda, welcome to The Narrow Path. Thanks for calling.
Oh, good afternoon, Steve, and thank you for your ministry. I have a friend who is a semi-retired pastor, and he believes, based on Daniel and Revelation, that the papacy is, in fact, the Antichrist. Oh, my gosh. I'm feeling emotional. And also, I'd like your opinion on that and what's the best way to read Revelation, since I'm not involved in the Internet. And then the last thing I'd like your opinion on, or how you read Scripture about, is God displeased if we don't feel emotional, keep the Saturday as the Holy Sabbath?
Okay.
And thank you. I'll listen. Thank you so much.
Okay. By the way, is the pastor you mentioned, is he a Seventh-day Adventist?
He has a ministry, and they meet at 2 o'clock on Saturday afternoon.
Sunday afternoon?
On Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Okay. The reason I ask is because it is the official view of the Seventh-day Adventists, not only that we have to keep the Sabbath on Saturday, but also that the Pope is the Antichrist. So both of those views agree with the Seventh-day Adventists. But there are people besides them who also keep the Saturday Sabbath. For example, there are Seventh-day Baptists, and there's other Seventh-day Church of God and things like that. So there are Seventh-day groups besides the Adventists. I'm not as familiar with them as I am with the Adventists. I know the Adventists do believe the papacy is the Antichrist. Now, let me just say about the papacy. There is a possibility that the little horn in Daniel chapter 7 does refer to the papacy. And the reason for that is the little horn grows out of the fourth beast. Now, I believe the fourth beast that came out of the sea in Daniel 7 is the Roman Empire. And Daniel sees and watches until that fourth beast is killed and his body is burned, which sounds like the end of the Roman Empire, the fall of Rome and so forth, of the empire. And then this little horn is focused upon. And he's a blasphemous little thing, grows out of the fourth beast, and has a career of blasphemy for a period of time. Now, it is historically the case that when the Roman Empire fell, the power that rose to fill that vacuum was the papacy. And the things that Daniel said the little horn would do are in fact things that some of the popes did do. Not every pope, but there have been many popes who have been guilty of the very things that the little horn is said to do. And so the reformers, not just Seventh-day Adventists and so forth, but Luther and Zwingli and Calvin and all the reformers, and even before the Reformation, Huss and Wycliffe and Tyndale, they believed that the papacy was the Antichrist and that it was the little horn. Now, they also thought that the papacy was the beast of Revelation 13. I'll say this. I can see some case to be made for the little horn in Daniel 7 being identified with the papacy. I mean, there's just the correspondence to what is predicted and the time frame and that kind of thing and what happened. That makes it a credible identification for the little horn. However, I don't see the beast in Revelation as the papacy. So, you see, there's a tendency for Christians to come up with this one evil power, the Antichrist. In the case of those who think it's the papacy, it's not just one man, it's a system that transcends centuries. But it continues, and it's the man of sin, it's the little horn, it's the beast out of the sea in Revelation. It's the willful king that we read about in the latter part of Daniel 11. These are all, evil entities, and the tendency has been, I think, frankly from the early church on, not the apostolic church necessarily, but the church fathers, they have tended to see all of these as the same thing, as the same bad entity. And as I pointed out, some saw it as an individual man, and some still do, and they call him the Antichrist. Some do not think it's an individual man. They think it's a system like the Papacy, and they call that the Antichrist. But what they all seem to do, at least they tend to do, is to think all these bad entities mentioned in these different books of the Bible are the same thing. And I don't agree. I don't think so. I mean, certainly there's some bad entities, some bad men, and some bad organizations throughout history, and some of them are mentioned in the Bible. But to me, it's entirely artificial to suggest that the beast of Revelation 13 is the same as the little horn of Daniel 7, and also the same as the man of sin in 2 Thessalonians 2. I mean, it seems to be the most popular view, and I think it's the laziest view. I think it's just lazy to say, well, here's a bad guy, here's another bad guy, here's another bad guy. Let's just make it all the same bad guy. Then we don't have to we can just put all these in the same bag. And actually, I think in some cases, it's different bad guys. I won't go into that now. Anyone who wants to listen to my lectures on Daniel or Revelation or 2 Thessalonians will find out what I think about that. But yeah, it was not uncommon at all. In fact, it was normative in the Reformation for Protestants to see the beast in Revelation as well as the little horn of Daniel 7 as the papacy. So this pastor you have, your friend, who identifies the papacy as the Antichrist, he's kind of on the same page that a lot of Protestants have been on, and even people before the Protestant Reformation, some. But I wouldn't necessarily agree with the Revelation 13 identification. Anyway, then you asked about the Sabbath. The Sabbath, according to Exodus, the Sabbath was the sign of the covenant God made with Israel at Mount Sinai, and he first commanded it there. Now, he actually told them to keep the Sabbath a few days before Mount Sinai when they were gathering manna. It was only a few days before. He said, don't gather manna on Saturday. Gather twice as much on Friday, and don't go out and do it on Saturday. So that's the first mention of the Sabbath, of commands. Now, people say, well, wait, no, Genesis 2, 1 through 3, that's the first mention of the Sabbath commands. No, there are no Sabbath commands in Genesis 2, verses 1 through 3. There's a Sabbath, but the only person who's rested there is God. There's no people resting there that we know of, and no command there that anyone should. So the Sabbath observance does not go back to Genesis 2, 1 through 3. That's where it just records that God rested on the seventh day and made that day different, holy, than other days. But he gave no commands, for example, to Adam and Eve or to anyone else, as far as we know, to keep it. The first command to rest on the Sabbath was given in Exodus 16 with reference to manna collection. And then the next time it's mentioned is in the Ten Commandments, and a few chapters later, chapter 20. And God said, I think it's in the 30th chapter of Exodus, he said to Israel that the keeping of the Sabbath would be the sign between him and them of the covenant. So it specifically is related to the law. It's specifically related to the covenant that was struck at Mount Sinai. Now that covenant has been made obsolete by the coming of a new covenant. The Bible says that where there's a new covenant, the old one is obsolete. That's Hebrews 8:13 says that. And the new covenant does not make any reference to keeping the Sabbath. Every covenant has its own stipulations and its own obligations. And Paul compares the covenants with like marriage covenants. He says in Romans 7, verses 1 through 4, that at one time God's people were married to him through the covenant at Mount Sinai. Israel was his wife. He was their husband. But now that has come to an end due to the death of Christ, he said. And now God's people are married to God through another covenant. We're married to the one who is risen from the dead that we might bear fruit to God, he said in Romans 7:4. So the new covenant is like a new husband. The old covenant is like an old husband who's died. Now, the analogy, we should have no trouble understanding that. If a woman has a husband and he says, listen, here's how I want the house to run, well, then that's how the house runs. But if he dies and she marries another man and he says, now this is how I want the house to run, it's not, there's some overlap, some similar things, but some different things. Well, she's not obligated to do what the dead husband said, not even any of them. But she is obligated to, follow the headship of the new husband. And in our case, the old husband, the law, said you have to keep the Sabbath day holy. The new husband, Christ, has made no such command. In fact, if anything, there's no subject over which he locked horns with the Jewish leaders more than on his refusal to keep the Sabbath in the way they thought he should. But he said because his father worked every day, he said, my father works every day, so I do too. So he didn't feel like it was necessary to keep the Sabbath, and he never told his disciples to do so. Thank you for your call. I apologize to the people waiting to go on that won't be able to get on today. This is only Monday, though, and essentially every day of the week we have the show. So those of you who didn't get on, please call tomorrow, and we'll hope to get your calls and your questions answered then. Thank you for everyone who has called, and for those of you who wanted to get on, again, please call again so we can get you on. You're listening to The Narrow Path. Our address is The Narrow Path, P.O. Box 1730, Temecula, California, 92593. And our website is thenarrowpath.com. Thanks for joining us. God bless.